It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the films of March 29th, 1996. We got 6 movies to look at. Well, okay, technically 5 because one of them is a re-release, but we've got 6 movies overall to take a look at, but 5 new ones, and including this first one here, the biggest new release of the weekend, and probably one of the most underrated comedies of all time, in this person's personal opinion, and that is Steve Martin as Sergeant Bilko. This is, of course, an adaptation of the Phil Silver show. He was called on that show Sergeant Bilko, or simply Bilko. This is basically a modernized version of that, written by Andy Breckman, who later go on to create the series Monk, and Jonathan Lynn, who had just done My Cousin Vinny and also Greedy. And it's just a really funny movie, man. I love this movie. It's a very underrated film. Not a whole lot of people really talk about it, honestly, but I gotta say, man, this movie makes me laugh pretty hard. This is a really damn good movie. Steve Martin is just perfectly cast as Bilko. I mean, he just has that he uses that great charisma that makes Steve Martin such a great comedic foil, like that asshole attitude to him. It's just perfect for this role here. Dan Aykroyd's very funny in this, so is Phil Hartman. We've got a really good cast overall in here, including Glenn Heady, Pamela Adlon, Austin Pendleton, Chris Rock, Deborah Jo Rupp, Daryl Mitchell. Just a phenomenal cast in here. The movie is absolutely hilarious. There are moments in this movie that make me laugh so hard every time I see it. Like when he's writing, all he has to do is write the word plan on the chalkboard. But no, he can't do that. He has to spell it backwards as he's spelling it out correctly. Like he's a P-L-A-N plan, and then he's like P-A-L-N. And he looks at the thing and he's just like, damn it. And it's just like, stuff like that is absolutely hilarious. And there's a lot of that in this movie. This is a really underrated comedy, honestly. I don't think a lot of people ever talk about it, but this is a really damn good movie. I really laugh a lot every time I watch this movie. It's a pretty funny film. If you haven't seen this movie, you are doing yourself a huge, huge disservice by not checking this movie out. It's a fantastic film. I can't recommend it enough. A very underrated comedy. Sergeant Bilko, by all means, please check it out. So that's Sergeant Bilko. Let's move on to the re-release of the weekend, and that is Disney's re-release of Oliver and Company. Now, since I've already covered this movie, in fact, it was actually one of the first reviews I ever did on this show. I'll go ahead and put a link to the first episode so you can check that out. But the question now is, why would Disney re-release this particular film? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, we're going to find out in just a little bit that there was another animated film that came out this weekend. And you know how Disney likes to try to stop the competition from trying to steal their money, and maybe that's one of the reasons why they did this. But another reason is Oliver and Company never got a video release after it first came out. Like, it's very interesting to think about it, but The Little Mermaid was actually the first modern Disney movie to get a video release less than a year after it came out in theaters, and that was a big deal back then. But Oliver and Company, it took 8 years to finally get it available on home video, and it started because of this trailer that they put, this re-release they had out there. That's probably the only new interesting aspect I have to this, but like I said before, I already reviewed this movie before on a previous episode, and my thoughts on it still stand. I think it's a very underrated Disney movie. It's not as good as the movie that came out on the same day that this did, The Land Before Time, but I still love this movie a lot. I love the animation, I love the music, I love the voice work, I love the comedy. It's just a great underrated Disney film. If you want to go see more of my in-depth review for this, like I said, I'll put a link to the corner from the first time I looked at this movie on the first episode. But that was one of the big new releases this weekend, the re-release of Oliver and Company. So, moving on to the next movie, and that is Robert Duvall and James Earl Jones starring in A Family Thing. This is actually a really underrated movie. You basically have Robert Duvall playing somebody who finds out that his biological mother was actually an African-American maid, and thus he ends up having a brother played by James Earl Jones, and it's just them trying to get along, and it's a very interesting concept, and it leads to a surprisingly effective movie. You also have Irma P. Hall, who plays Ray's Ann in the movie, and one of the interesting things I didn't know about this until now was that Billy Bob Thornton was actually one of the writers on this movie, and this was the year where he also wrote the script for Sling Blade and eventually starred in that film. But that's very interesting to note about this movie. I remember watching trailers for this back in the day, thinking maybe it could be interesting, but I never really saw it until most recently, and I gotta say, I thought it was a very underrated film. I think it is a very underrated film. Robert Duvall and James Earl Jones are giving these really strong performances. There is a lot to really like about this movie. I think it has a lot of heart to it. It has a lot of good comedy to it. It's a very good film overall. It's a really nice film. It doesn't really have to go completely over the top or do too much to really get the message out there. I think it does more than enough to really cement itself as a surprisingly effective movie. It's a very underrated film. If you want to see Robert Duvall and James Earl Jones in some of their most underrated works, this is definitely one of them. I'd highly recommend checking out A Family Thing. So that's that, and let's move on to the next movie, the previously mentioned animated film that came out this weekend, and that is the sequel to the original 1989 Don Bluth film, All Dogs Go to Heaven 2. I mean, the original All Dogs Go to Heaven is kind of an underrated gem for me, at least. To say it's one of the greatest animated films of all time is kind of pushing it. One of the biggest animated films of all time, kind of pushing it as well, because you lost out to The Little Mermaid when this came out. I mean, but if you look at this trailer, you can kind of know right away that this is not anywhere near as good as the first movie. And I mean, for one thing, the animation does look terrible. You cannot convince me that this was originally supposed to be a direct-to-video movie, and then someone says, let's put it on the big screen because All Dogs Go to Heaven is a property and we can actually make money off of it. And especially if you watch the high-definition version of it that's been playing on TV, it looks even worse than you probably would expect it to be. And not only that, the overall story really isn't all that good. You've got Charlie and Itchy returning to Earth to find Gabriel's horn, and then along the way they meet this kid named David, and it's basically kind of a retread of the first movie all over again. It just replaced Anne Marie with this kid, and the new kid is so vanilla and plain, and you could definitely tell that this was a film made in the 1990s, and it just didn't work. The original movie didn't work that way because it took place way back, didn't take place in modern times. Actually, it's like, I can't remember if it took place in the 40s or 50s, but I think it was somewhere around there. I need to double check this. I wasn't off by too much, 1939 New Orleans, but you could definitely tell this takes place in the early 90s. The ending to and one of the other reasons why it doesn't work is that the ending to the first movie worked. Charlie sacrifices his life to save Anne Marie from a fire, and the ghost of Charlie comes back to apologize, and eventually Annabelle, the dog equivalent the dog equivalent of God in this movie, who banished Charlie from heaven from the first time around, basically tells him he can come back into heaven. And so it had a heavy happy ending. Yeah, Charlie's going to heaven, but he's apologizing for his actions. But in here, it's just your typical happy ending. He gets the horn back, and he basically gets a chance to go back to Earth. And it basically is one of the most cliched, riddled endings that perfectly sums up why it's a lackluster film compared to the first film. The songs themselves even aren't that great either. I mean, none of them reach the memorability of the songs of the original film, and most of them are just forgettable. The only song that I thought kind of worked was the first song, "Too Heavenly Here," and even the song that Sheena Easton does in this is actually okay, but it's nothing too spectacular. And I'll give the movie credit. Some of the voice acting is better here. Like, I do think that better's not what I would say. It's as good as the original film. I think Charlie Sheen does a pretty good job as a replacement for Burt Reynolds playing Charlie. Dom DeLuise, you're always going to enjoy him in there. Bebe Neuwirth in here as Annabelle, and Ernest Borgnine as Carface actually work pretty well. The newer voices actually work pretty well too. But other than that, though, this is a largely forgettable sequel. The original All Dogs Go to Heaven kind of holds this place in my heart and my childhood. It's a film I used to watch all the time. It's a movie I still watch today, even after all these years. But this is a movie that is just so lame and so bad. It's an insult to the original film. And the fact that this actually convinced them to make not only a Christmas movie after this, but a TV series, which actually looked a lot better than this movie did, it just tells you all you need to know about this. This was basically made to cash in on the original success, but it's a bad sequel. It's poorly animated, poorly written, poorly executed. It's one of the most lousy animated movies to ever hit the big screen, and that says a lot, really. So anyway, that's All Dogs Go to Heaven 2. Let's move on to the next movie that we have here, and that is Carried Away. I mean, we've pretty much seen this story done over and over again. If you can't figure it out, you have this guy who's a middle-aged school teacher played by Dennis Hopper, which, middle-aged. I mean, Dennis Hopper, I think, was in his 60s when this came out. Yeah, he was 60 when this came out. Middle-aged my ass. He's a middle-aged school teacher who lives on a farm with his dying mother. There's no excitement in his life, even in his long-term relationship with a widow played by Amy Irving. However, when a 17-year-old beauty enrolls in his class, life takes an unexpected turn. She boards his house in this barn and then seduces him, carries on a relationship which leaves him torn between the passion and knowing that he is doing something wrong. And do you really need me to explain what else goes on in here? I mean, we've seen this done over and over again, and it's always going to end up in the exact same way. It's just like, do I really need to explain what probably happens at the end of this movie? I've never even seen this movie, but I can guarantee you what happens in it happens. What I think happens in it happens in this movie. I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, I don't think there's anything that's new or different about this. But other than that, Gary Busey's in here too, apparently. So is Hal Holbrook. And that's pretty much all I know about this movie. I mean, that premise alone is really more than enough to probably make me never want to see this movie, honestly. I don't think I ever want to see this film. And that's pretty much all I got for you on that one. That's Carried Away. So let's go to the next movie, the last movie, I should say, and that is Denise Calls Up. Who's Denise? We'll never know. Actually, we do know. It's actually Alana Ubach, who, that name may not sound familiar to you, but trust me, if you've seen her in person, if I actually showed you a picture of her, you'd probably know who it is. You've definitely seen her in a lot of stuff before. She's been in stuff like, she was in Legally Blonde 1 and 2. She was also in Meet the Fockers, the Brady Bunch movie, Sister Act 2, Waiting. She's done stuff in TV like Euphoria, The Flight Attendant. She's done a lot of voice work. She was in Rango. She was in Brandy and Mr. Whiskers, Pound Puppies. I'm telling you, if I put her picture up there, you definitely know who it is. And if I do that, here it is right here. But that's not the point that we're trying to make here. The point is, I'm just trying to fill time here because I've never seen this movie. But to give you kind of a sum up of what this is, it's basically another one of those type of comedies we got during this time period where you're following a group of friends in New York City who, while working at their PCs and laptops, are keeping in touch by phone and fax, never seem to be able to get together. And it's one of those type of ensemble comedies where you have all these different stories going on, and you follow them, the chaos that ensues, and then you eventually get everybody together at the end of the movie, which could be a decent thing. I mean, this has a pretty good cast to it. You got Tim Daly, Dana Wheeler-Nicholson, Liev Schreiber's in this, Ada Turturro, the previously mentioned Alana Ubach. There are some good people involved in this, and the film has some decent reviews to it too, so who knows? It might actually be something kind of decent. It's not something I'd rush out to see, but I don't know. Maybe it could be something. So yeah, anyway, that's Denise Calls Up. And so on that note, that wraps up this edition of Time About the Movies. When we meet next time, we'll have 4 movies to look at, including Richard Gere and Edward Norton starring in the thriller Primal Fear, Martin Lawrence and Lynn Whitfield in A Thin Line Between Love and Hate. We also have Faithful and also The Last Supper. So 4 movies to look at next time around. We'll delve into those on the next episode. But until then, thank you very much for watching. And if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page. Check out the previous episode. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. And until then, as always, take care.